Hey everyone, welcome to today's video, which is going to be a multi-part series on me doing some basal testing. As you guys have probably noticed that I started an Omnipod insulin pump, and I've been messing with some of my insulin to carb ratios, but before I mess with them any further, they're very close to what I need, but they're not quite. I think they need to be upped a little more, but before I mess with them anymore, I want to see if I have major problems with basal insulin. As you know, basal insulin is designed to keep you steady and stable when you're not eating or when you're overnight. It's designed to kind of help with the fluctuation of blood glucose values through your liver. If you know, biological. It's designed to help your body maintain biological function, whereas your bolus insulin is designed to help with maintaining good blood sugars while you're eating or when you're eating foods containing carbohydrates. So there's 4 main parts to a basal test. I will actually turn around the camera and show you this guide that I'm going to be following. You test your morning, your lunchtime, your dinner, and your overnight. So far I've noticed on this pump that my overnight seems to be very, very stable. It's not changing by much, but I'm still going to retest it again tonight. That is this first part tonight, is that I will be testing my overnight basal. I'm kind of working backwards. Instead of starting with testing with the morning, lunch, dinner, I'm starting with overnight and then dinner, then lunch, then morning, because it works better with my schedule where I'm not going to have any unusual activity. And I also believe I'm going to need the biggest changes at lunchtime and dinner time because that's when I'm most active in between time, and I think I'll need a reduction in basal insulin at that time. So today, like I said, I'm going to be testing my basal rate for overnight. It is about 4 o'clock in the afternoon here. I cannot eat dinner no later than 7 to 7:30 p.m. because I'm going to be starting the test at 11 p.m. I'm running the test from 11 p.m. till 8 a.m. That's about the time when I sleep. It's about a 9-hour period. And I'm going to see if there's any major fluctuations in blood sugar. So basal testing, you are looking for major fluctuations in blood sugars. Now, I've never truly basal tested before because I've only been on like long-acting insulin, and I found that one shot covered me really well. However, because I'm on a pump, I have the opportunity to manipulate my basal insulin to more appropriately meet the needs of my body and more appropriately mirror a non-diabetic's pancreas. So basal testing, you want to look for major changes in blood sugar. So if I start off going to bed at a blood sugar of like 110, that's a pretty good blood sugar, right? Well, if in the middle of the night and towards when I wake up in the morning, my blood sugar changes more than 30 milligrams per deciliter, 25 to 30, so say it skyrockets to over 140 or it plummets way below 70, then that indicates to me that I need less insulin if it plummets and more if it doesn't. And you're going to tweak it by 0.05 or 0.1. They recommend, because I'm an adult, to do 0.1, so that's what I will try. And then to reevaluate the following day or reevaluate at a different time to see if that is a problem. The easiest one to test is your overnight because you're not worrying about getting up in the middle of the night and eating anything. And they do also recommend that if you are basal testing, do not do it near a menstrual period. If you are a lady, do not basal test 2 days before your menstrual period or during your menstrual period because that can screw with things. Don't do tons of unusual activity or heavy exercise because obviously you're going to need less insulin for that point. And if you want to see what a normal day looks like for you, you can't have unusual activity. The other thing that they do recommend is if you do have to change things, change them a couple hours ahead of time. So if you notice, like, for example, your blood sugar rises at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, you're going to want to change that basal rate at 1 o'clock in the morning so that it has time to kick in, because when you change a basal rate at the time you need it, it's not going to kick in. You need to change it before so that when the blood sugar rises or falls ahead of time, that new programmed basal time period is working for you. I will be finger sticking for this experiment. During the meal times, you do finger stick 5 times. When you are doing overnight, you finger stick 3 to 4 times. But I also will be looking at my Dexcom G6 CGM data, and that can even give me more of an insight as to what's going on in between the times that I'm finger sticking. So, like I said, no abnormal activity. Don't be near any periods. They also don't recommend, like I said, if you like have a high stress day or like I said, extra activity is going to impact your basal testing, and they don't recommend doing it all in one day, so I'm breaking it up into the 4 days that they recommend. So the overnight is from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m., and that is what I'm doing today. And I will update you guys in the morning what happens and what I recorded, and I don't foresee any changes in my overnight, just because the few nights that I've been on the pump, during those hours, my blood sugar stays between, it stays between 90 to 110. So it's pretty set in its way. It's not like it's going from 90 to 150 down back to 80. It's not fluctuating a lot. However, like I said, I think I'm going to need the most change in my basal rate is at dinner and lunchtime. And based upon the data I've looked at for people my age, that is the most truth. Now I'll flip around the paper and show you what this paper looks like. I got it from AccuCheck.com, so I will give you a link to that where you can get it. I also read some other articles from people that have wrote the book Think Like a Pancreas, and I've also read articles from another website. I'll leave that link down below as to how they recommend basal testing. But this one explained it pretty simply. And then I looked at a couple other things, and everything is pretty much the same as far as what they guideline for. And as far as like the meals, I'll show you kind of like how they set things up to where like you can't eat at this time, so that you know what this time looks like for basal insulin. There's a couple other rules. Before I flip the paper around, there's a couple other rules I forgot to mention. Number one, you cannot do it when you're changing your infusion set. So when you're doing this, make sure that you have your pump on fully. Do not be changing your infusion set during the time you're testing, because that can mess with things, because you're interrupting insulin, you're interrupting possible other factors that can fluctuate with your blood sugar. Number two, do not be running on a temporary basal, because obviously you can't see what the original basal is doing. And number three, keep the basal insulin continuous. Do not suspend it. Or if you're on a tubed pump, obviously if you're on the Omnipod, the only thing you can do is suspend the insulin. But if you're on a tube pump, do not suspend insulin, nor do you need to be disconnecting and reconnecting to your tubing or your infusion set, because again, you're interrupting insulin flow. And if you're trying to figure out how your background insulin is working, how can you figure that out when you have it adjusted, or you're not properly getting the amount that you need per hour, or what you're originally set up for as a straight line? Like I said, because they just set me up on one basal rate for whole 24 hours. Well, ideally, that's not what people need. I'm at 0.4 right now. I may need 0.4 for a good chunk of those hours, and I don't doubt that, especially the overnight, but I definitely probably don't need that 0.4 during the afternoon. I may need 0.3 or 0.35 or even 0.25. I don't know, and it's going to take several times for me to test this, but I'm going to show you just this one set, and then maybe I'll come back to you guys in a few weeks and share with you after if I have to repeat any of these set tests. If I predict any reset of the test, it'll probably be at lunch and dinner. Again, I'll explain more in the next clip. But then I will situate everything and then sit back with you guys down in a couple weeks and reevaluate basal testing and my recommendations for it, and show you my new basal program. So yeah, we'll get started here. So as you can see, this says how to test a basal rate. So I'm doing my overnight first, and then I will do my dinner, lunch, morning. I'm working my way backwards because it works better with my schedule. So my bedtime, I'm going to go from 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. My dinner, I'm going from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Lunch, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. Keep in mind, if you don't eat breakfast or lunch or dinner during these hours, you're going to have to flip them around. Say you work a third shift or something and you actually eat your breakfast in the middle of the night, well, then these times are going to be different for you, so what you actually need. And obviously, if you're more active in the middle of the night, you may actually need to decrease the amount of what they would consider for me an overnight basal. You may need to decrease that, and maybe during the daytime when you are sleeping for your overnight third shift, you might need to actually increase your basal insulin. So I also have notes here that I started at 0.4 an hour, and it does recommend, because I'm at that basal rate, to adjust by 0.1 and retest to confirm that it actually works. If 0.1 is too big of an adjustment from one of these, I will readjust up or down depending on what I'm finding by 0.05. So let's say at dinner time, I'm at 0.4 right now. I'm at a steady 0.4. I find at dinner time that I'm dropping. Or I'm dropping more than 30 milligrams per deciliter continuously. Well, that means I need to reduce. So I would originally try reducing by 0.3. that seems to be too much of a reduction and I'm going a little higher than I want, I would say, okay, then I guess my only choice, being that I'm on the Omnipod, would be to go with 0.35. Now, if you're on Medtronic or Tandem, you may be able to dial that in even tighter, but I know on the Omnipod it goes by 0.05, so everything is 0.30, 0.35, 0.40, 0.45, if you get what I'm saying. So I'm going to be doing finger sticks, but I also will be watching CGM data like I have here. And then here's all the general guidelines. And then I added these extra ones that weren't in here that I have read from other articles. No abnormal activity, no heavy exercise, or near a menstrual period for at least 2 days. This is perfect because by the time I finish this, I will be close to starting my period, but not right up against it. So it's not going to be really effective for that. They also don't recommend that you drink caffeine because that can, like I said, you've seen my caffeine experiment. Depending on if you're one of these people that are affected by caffeine, it can mess with your basal testing. So do not do that. I'm going to be avoiding that. So if you are basal testing, the things that are safe to drink would be like waters, diet drinks with no caffeine, and no caloric foods. Those are the safest things for you to eat. Although I don't know what's a no caloric food. Cucumbers, because they're water. The best thing you can do is, because I'm breaking it into shorter time periods, is that just fast for them full 5 hours except drinking water to see what happens. So as you can see, for the meal ones, you're only fasting at most for up to 5 hours. Overnight's easier because obviously if you sleep 8 or 9 hours a night, that's an easy 8 or 9 hour fast that you can look at data from. So this is what this looks like, and then I'll flip the back where it kind of shows you how to do it. So for overnight, this is what I'm working on first. Bedtime test should be at least 3.5 hours after last bolus. So since I'm starting this basal test at 11 p.m., I can't have dinner no later than 7:30 p.m., which is fine. I'm looking at making my dinner around 6 p.m. because that mirrors the time when I actually would be doing this dinner time test. So that'll be good. That will be an easy qualification to meet. Number 2, bedtime blood sugar should be 100 to 150. Most of the times I've tested before bed, I have been at that level, closer on that lower level, but they recommend that you be in this level. But because I have a CGM, if I'm in the 90s, I'm not going to be concerned. But obviously, if my blood sugar is way below 90 or way below 80, then there's something really wrong. And if it's way above 150, there's something wrong. So that's why they recommend, to keep your blood sugar at that level, is to not eat a high-fat dinner and not eat a bedtime snack. The other reason why I'm starting with overnight basal testing, besides that it's the easiest, is because my dinner insulin to carb ratio must be close, because the past 2 times that I've tried it, my blood sugar has been between 130 and 150 2 hours post-meal. So that's why I'm going to start with this one, because I know it's not going to be royally screwed up from royally screwed up insulin to carb ratios. So I'm not going to be eating a lot of high-fat concentrated dinner, nor will I have a snack or anything before bedtime. I'm not a huge snacker, but if you are, keep that in mind that you cannot do this when you're basal testing. They recommend testing at bedtime, 2 a.m., and upon waking up, and it gives you actions here. If it rises more than 30 milligrams per deciliter, I'd say 25 to 30, you got to give some variance. Increase your overnight basal rate slightly. Because I'm on a lower basal rate, I'm only going to increase by 0.1. If you're taking more than 1 unit an hour, they recommend by 0.2 and retest again. If your blood sugar drops, reduce and retest and repeat. You're going to reduce it by this amount, the same. If your blood sugar stays level, so based upon CGM data, or changes no more than 30 during 8 hours of sleep. So by these finger sticks, if I'm changing no more than 30 milligrams per deciliter during my 8 hours of sleep, and I just have it at 9, it's close enough. Good basal rate, retested, verified. So I predict I'm going to be at the same, or maybe just a little more. Because the few times that I have gotten up in the middle of the night, or like even just testing from these 2 periods. Now, obviously, I'm going to get up and test this 2 a.m. because that is important, because that has to do with dawn phenomenon, that has to do with hormonal effects, liver spilling glucose in your system. I will test at 2 a.m. But based upon, for me, testing at bedtime and upon waking, I'm not changing more than 10, maybe 10 or 12 milligrams per deciliter. So last night I went to bed at 103. I woke up at 91 this morning. And my CGM data was very, very steady, very, very stable. So I predict that my overnight is actually set. But again, it doesn't hurt to test again for another 3rd night. But this time I'm going to be more restrictive and make sure I eat my normal dinner time, no later than this time, keeping blood glucose levels in this range, and also not eating heavy fat. It also goes through what to do for the morning, the lunch, and the dinner. Most of these requirements are the same, except for you're looking at these key words. For your morning test, you're going to skip breakfast and don't bolus for it. Lunch, you're going to skip lunch and not bolus. Dinner, you're going to skip dinner and not bolus. So you're going to do this upon waking, and every 5 hours after waking, you're going to test your blood sugar. If your blood sugar changes, again, you're going to adjust, up or down. Then you can eat after your last test. So after I test from the 5th blood sugar at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I can now eat, and which would be at the end, it would be like right at the beginning of a usual lunchtime for me, which makes sense, because look what I have here, lunchtime, 1 p.m. So that's how that works. I predict I'm going to either be the same or maybe a little more, because I have noticed even with continuously giving myself more insulin for insulin to carb ratios in the morning, I'm still running a little high after. So I'm predicting I may need a little more insulin, but who knows? May need less. I don't know. It's my prediction. Just because it's a prediction doesn't mean what's actually going to happen for me. But I'm giving you my predictions. And keep in mind, like I said, the timing that I'm showing you works for me. It may not work for you, like I said, if you have an overnight job or you have a different schedule than me. Keep that in mind. But I'm actually going to be working backwards. So this is what I'm going to be doing first, is overnight. Then I'll work down to my dinner, lunch, morning, because it's more convenient for me. And this is also, like I said, because of the fact that I'm looking for the most changes here. I foresee the most changes here, because this is when I'm most active, if this makes sense to you guys. And like I said, this is my first time basal testing. I'm not going to be perfect at it, but I'm going to follow the guidelines very, very meticulously in here and see if I can pull up my own basal insulin, my whole 24-hour basal map, and see what's going to happen here. So for the lunch and the dinner, I predict less only because of my activity, and obviously it repeats the same information, obviously, except you're testing at 2 different times. So then I also have here as a reminder, basal rates changed 1 to 2 hours prior to rise or fall. So for example, my blood sugar rises between 3 and 7 a.m. I need to change that basal rate between 2 and 6 a.m. That is for a 1 hour change. For adults, they recommend a 2 hour change. And because I've noticed, at least in my body, that the insulin does take a while to kick in, especially if it's an increase, I might even change 2 hours prior. But I might start with 1 for now, and if I find that doesn't work, I can fix it. When you're on basal testing and when you get everything all settled pretty much the way you want it, you should have 1 peak and 1 valley. Meaning that there should be a time during the day where you need a little bit more basal insulin, and there's a time during the day when you need less. Typically, this is more during the overnight hours and into the morning, and by the time you roll around your afternoon, you need less. This is true mainly too for people my age. I'll pull up some graphs in here if I can remember to show you some of the pictures I found online. But this is true for a lot of people my age, and this is true for many people that are more active during the afternoon and less active during the morning. If you're the opposite, you might need, this peak and valley might be different. You might valley first and then peak later. If you're seeing continuous peak, valley, that means your basal insulin is not set correctly, or you're overcompensating for an insulin to carb ratio that needs to be either upped or downed, if that makes sense. So let's say if I have a peak, valley, and then another peak at dinner. Well, what is my insulin to carb ratio for dinner? Oh, it's 1 to 15. Why don't I consider dropping that to a 1 per 13 and reducing that basal rate back to where it originally was, and see if that doesn't make a difference? Because if you're having continuous peak, valley, you either have a really different body. This is it can happen, but it's rare, they said. Or you have something screwed up with the amount of bolus insulin you're getting for a meal. So thank you to the person who recommended I do this basal testing. I can't remember your name, but you're really cool. Thank you. If I remember your name, I'll put your name in here. And you gave me some good advice, like I said, when you were saying to test and look for a change, and then adjust that change 2 hours prior. And obviously, like I said, if I go low or high, let's say my blood sugar goes below 70 or way above 250, I have to stop the basal test. I cannot continue. Obviously, I'm not going to let a blood sugar continuously drop or increase. But then if you're having to stop a basal test, that also indicates that you do need to change your basal insulin somewhere, because if you're going low somewhere, there's something wrong with the amount of basal rate you're getting at that time. You need a lot less. And if you're going high continuously at a certain time, that means you need a lot more basal insulin. So I hope this gives you guys a good guide. And I hope I explained things nicely. The next time you will see me, it will be my results from the morning, and I will let you guys know if I plan on adjusting my overnight basal rate. So, wish me luck, and I will be back with you guys in the morning. I wanted to give you guys an update. It is the next morning. I could not basal test overnight because I had a piece of cheese and forgot that I couldn't have anything to eat. Plus, I brought down a stubborn high blood sugar from dinner. It was 177, and by the time I went to bed, I was 120. But my Dexcom has also been acting funny, so like it wasn't catching my drop. So it was saying my blood sugar was still 170 when it was 120, and it's been acting up for the past 3 days I've had it on. So I will be calling Dexcom tech support or Dexcom support today, and hopefully they will replace this sensor. So I will put a new one on. But based upon the data that I have seen, even though it isn't like perfect, it was riding me higher than what I actually was, there's stability. So I don't foresee any changes to my overnight, maybe at like 11 p.m., but that's something I can adjust for my dinner test because I'm dinner testing from 6 p.m. to midnight. So that's kind of like that time frame, or 6 p.m. to 11, kind of that area of time. So I want to let you guys know that. I did not basal test for overnight last night, but that's really easy to do anytime because it doesn't really take much effort to basal test at night, as long as you don't eat a high-fat meal and that you don't bolus 3.5 to 4 hours before you begin the test. So tonight I'm going to actually skip dinner, so that means that I'm starting at 6 p.m. So my last bolus should be no later than 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon to allow that to get out of my body. My pump is set for every 3 hours, so technically any bolus after 3 p.m. would not make a valid basal test. So I will be skipping dinner tonight, and we'll see if I need more or less insulin. I predict less between 6 and 9 p.m. and then I think from 10 to midnight I might need a slight increase. So we will make those adjustments and we will see how that goes. So I wanted to give you guys an update, and I will talk to you guys later tonight. And because I'm already going to be fasting for dinner, I may just do the basal test for overnight right away too, because there's not going to be anything active in my body. So I'll try to basal test from 6 p.m. tonight all the way through 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, so I can gotta get 2 done in a row. And then the next day, which the next day for you guys tomorrow is Sunday, I will skip lunch, and then the following morning I'm going to skip breakfast. So like I said, it doesn't really matter what order they do them in. They ask you to do them in, they have it that you do each one like one step at a time, but I'm kind of working backwards only because it's more convenient for me, because I don't need any unusual activity when I'm basal testing, because that's going to screw everything up. And number 2, I'm trying to start with the meals where I think that I need the most work on, which would be definitely dinner and lunch. Breakfast and overnight may need slight changes, but I don't foresee a lot, but I do foresee a decrease in the afternoon time. So anyways, we'll get back to the video. Welcome to the basal testing, and kind of just whatever happens with the basal testing. So first of all, I told you guys this morning that I am fasting for my dinner time. So that is between 6 p.m. and midnight. I started out with a blood sugar of 110. Did lots of activity today to keep it down in a range. And they recommend being between 100 and 155. So far, so good. I'm almost 40 minutes in, so I'm doing pretty good. But I told you I had to replace my Dexcom sensor because it wasn't reading right. And I called them, and they replaced that. And then I put a new one on my arm, and it kept giving me calibration errors. So I knew immediately to call them, and they replaced that one. And it bled everywhere. The same spot I had this problem. My second ever Dexcom sensor I put in a very similar location, and it gushed blood. However, I cleaned the blood up and put the transmitter back in, because that was one of the best sensors I ever had as far as accuracy and being spot on with a meter. So in 2 hours that'll be warmed up. However, I am doing finger sticks for this basal test. I think it is important. However, looking at CGM data can also help with things. Keep in mind that I will not be eating. The only thing I can be having is any non-caloric foods, which I think would be like cucumbers and weird things like that, although I'm not really hungry right now. Water, diet drinks with no caffeine. I can't do any unusual activity, and I'm nowhere near my menstrual period. I am kind of stuffy. However, I was stuffy before I started my pump, so I'm thinking, and my blood sugars were really good, so I'm thinking it's not really a big cold, or if it is, it's not messing with blood sugars too much. So I'm not going to worry about that, but I'm not highly stressed. I'm not doing anything unusual for the next 6 hours. So I did have some activity today, but I did stop that activity like majorly by like 3:30, 4 o'clock. So I haven't been majorly active in a few hours. So hopefully that'll be out of my body. And I haven't really ate it. I haven't bolused since 1:30 this afternoon. The last thing I did eat was at 3 o'clock, which is 3 hours prior to this test, which is good. I had to eat a few Skittles to keep my blood sugar up because I was like a 150, but I had like over a unit of insulin on board, so I had like 5 Skittles, and it kept me upright. And like I said, I was 110 at 6 p.m. I will see what it is I am at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, and we'll make some conclusions, change my basal rate, and I will be all set. I don't foresee a lot of changes with my basal insulin. I think my basal profile looks really good with a flat line, but I think, like a non-diabetic, there is a circadian rhythm where I'm probably going to need more during the sleeping hours and the dawn phenomenon and a little less when I'm active. I think tomorrow will be the most difficult dealing with lunch because that is when I'm most active, and I feel like I'm going to go low, which indicates that, I'm not going to do any unusual activity, but that indicates that I have to reduce my basal rate and stop the test and then retest, which is going to be a pain in the rear. But you know what? It's going to be worth it, and it's going to help me better set everything for my pump so that I'm not dealing with things crazy. And yeah, so that's kind of like how I said how basal testing works. I've never actually done one before. I'm just going off of what I read in a little chart I found, like I said, from AccuCheck, and it makes sense to me. And obviously, like the meals I eat before, so like my lunch was not high fat because fat can delay blood sugar spikes. So I had like crackers. I had a few pieces of cheese, which does have some fat, and I did have an applesauce. So it was a very low fat meal. So there's no way that the blood sugar would have been delayed from that meal. The spike actually was pretty significant. It went from like 120 to like 160, and then it leveled off. So I wasn't with the CGM, so I've been doing a lot of finger sticks today, but that's okay. Hanging in there, and I'm gonna make some adjustments, and hopefully I'll be able to see a nice hill and valley or peak and low point in my basal profile on my pump when I have it all set up. Then once I get a decent idea of where my basal insulin sits, I will mess with my insulin to carb ratios. However, I messed with it again this morning just to see what would happen, and it helped more. But I'm down to a 1 to 12 at breakfast, and my original breakfast was 1 to 10, so I'm thinking I'm actually going to need the same breakfast. However, though, I'm not sure if it's because I have a basal rate problem in the morning. So when I skip breakfast, I'll be able to find out if I need more insulin in addition to that bolus. So I may be covering for basal with a bolus and not even realizing it. So that's why I stepped back and read from this person and from a lot of you saying the basal is super important, and now I'm seeing more why, because I'm on a pump. However, you should basal test if you're on shots. When I was on shots, I kind of basal tested, but not like formally fasting. Like I would look at my fasting blood sugar and my evening blood sugar, and I would also look in between meals, and if I was doing anything, if I was being more normal in my activity, I would know if I would drop lower or higher that I needed an increase by 1 or 2 units at night, or a decrease depending on, again, if you see high to lows. So I'm going to film a genteel video for you guys that will be going up before this one, and edit tonight and just relax, let this Dexcom warm up. Do usual things that I would be doing during this time so that I can get a better picture of what my basal insulin needs are. So, because obviously if I was going to go out and mow grass like I did this afternoon and earlier this morning, that would obviously not be an accurate reflection of what I need in the evening. So, I will get back to you guys. Maybe I'll check with you midway, but I think I'll check back with you at the end of the test and show you my blood sugar results, and if I had to stop the test for any reason. Again, we're looking for huge blood sugar fluctuations, more than 30 milligrams per deciliter, either direction. Obviously, if my blood sugar rises more than 30 between the 6 hours that I'm testing, or drops more than 30, I need a change. So I will get back to you guys later. I sadly had to abort my test. I was able to get 2 hours worth, and then I'll have to pick up where I left off on a different day. My blood sugar started at 110, dropped to 87, and dropped to 56, so I had to treat a low and abort the test. But I was able to learn that obviously I need less basal insulin between the hours of 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. So therefore I made the adjustment for 2 hours prior. I had dropped it by 0.1 to be a 0.30 units per hour from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. because it takes time for that to get a change. I can't change it then, otherwise it's not going to kick in. It'll kick in at the time I don't need it to kick in. So, what I've decided to do is do my overnight testing tonight. So I bolused at 8 p.m. I cannot bolus later than 9 p.m. to start testing for at midnight to 8 a.m. So I bolused for a fairly low carb or a low fat dinner. I had like 1 or 2 eggs and a piece of toast with minimal like oils, fats, butters. Yes, eggs do have some fat, but I didn't go like eat tons of chocolate. I didn't put tons of dressing. I didn't eat tons of dairy products beyond just the eggs or anything. So that should be good, and I can't bolus beyond 9 p.m. Hoping blood sugars behave, but I'll have my CGM up and running pretty soon, so that'll definitely help. But I wanted to give you guys an update. So I did learn something, which is pretty cool, and it might explain why before dinner, even with correcting a high blood sugar after lunch, my blood sugars were like 70s, low 80s before a meal, and I've had to bump them up with like sugar and stuff. That might explain why, because I'm getting too much basal insulin at that time, and my body needs a little less. So because it was way more than a 30-point change in blood sugar, obviously I adjusted it by 0.1. Now if it was more of a change of like 15, 20 where it was borderline, I may have only dropped it to 0.35, but this is a significant drop, so therefore I'm going to drop it a bit. Dropping it by 0.1 is still okay. Now, I'll have to reevaluate this at a different time, either do a full fasting for 24 hours or look at this at a different time, but I think it'll work better. And obviously, if I need more of a reduction, that's cool too. I may need another reduction, but a slightly less one. Maybe I'll need 0.25. Maybe I'll need 0.2. But this is kind of how you make these adjustments and make them work. So right now I have 2 peaks and 1 valley in my sugar readings, but you have, or in my basal profile, but you have to remember I'm not finished with the tests. And once I get that, I will smooth that out to make it only 1 peak and 1 valley. Because if, like I said before, if you have multiple peaks and multiple valleys, that means there's probably something wrong with your basal profile, or you're covering for meals with basal insulin where they should be covered with insulin to carb ratios. So I will be back with you guys at midnight, and we'll go from there. So it's a little update for you guys. I said I'd update you at midnight, but it's actually 9 o'clock. I ate, like I said, a fairly low carb dinner. Blood sugar is sitting in the 90s and 100s, which is perfect, because if my basal insulin is truly working from midnight to 8 p.m., I should not change much. Though the few times I have run high or low, or higher or normal, with my basal insulin, it's been perfect. Like literally, like it would stay either at that level or not. So it's just a matter of then straightening the insulin to carb ratio beforehand, so that I'm not high before bed or whatever the case may be. But I put a 3rd Dexcom sensor on, and it was giving me calibration errors again. But then it magically started working. So now it says I'm 102 and stable. We'll keep it. Last thing I ate, I had a few extra crackers with dinner, just because I feel like I over bolused a little bit, because I actually bolused for the protein and the eggs. I took like an extra half a unit just to bolus for 2 eggs, because they do contain almost 10 grams of protein. So I kind of overrided the pump in that aspect, but it did give me a reverse correction for a 77 because I had to treat that low from aborting my fast. So it is just after 9 o'clock, so now I can no longer eat any more food, because you cannot basal test with active Humalog in your body. So the last time I bolus was like 8 o'clock, but you can't have any active food in your body for at least 2.5 to 3 hours. 3 hours is ideal, because that's when like the Humalog's working and your bolus dose is working. So update you at midnight, but I wanted to let you know I'm sick and tired of dealing with these Dexcom problems, but I figured it out and it seems to be working. So wish me luck. It's gonna work. So yeah. I sadly have to abort my lunch test today because my blood sugar is still dropping, which still indicates that I need less basal during this time, but I can't basal test for lunch particularly. So I'm going to redo dinner tonight and my overnight, and hopefully I'll be able to get some things straightened out. Basal testing absolutely sucks. I'm telling you that right now, but it is so worth it to figure this out, and I know I'm going to figure it out eventually, and I'm smart enough, and like I said, I'm looking at finding a new endo team, because I don't care for the way that they're suggesting things, or they're suggesting things that don't make sense. Because like, why I was going high, why would you reduce basal insulin when we're still working on carb ratios? And then the more I thought about it, the more I should look at my basal insulin instead of my carb ratios, But why would I go ahead and reduce the whole entire program? Because they believe in one flatline basal program. That's not true. Your body actually needs more and less basal at different times during the day. So I will get back to you guys later tonight. Hopefully I'll be able to resume my dinner testing. I got from 6 to 8 tonight, so I should be able to do 8 to midnight and then midnight to 8. And then I'm going to do 8 to noon tomorrow for breakfast. I'm going to try to do it all like in a row, and hopefully that'll help. Not for 100% sure, just because I'm going to have less activity and stuff. But basal testing, like I said, is a pain in my rear, and it's a pain in anybody's rear who's diabetic, and it's the suckiest thing about being diabetic is tuning your basal rate. But once you figure out when you need more insulin and when you need less, I think it'll make everything easier to come into place for insulin to carb ratios. I know my insulin sensitivity factor is correct last night because I corrected my blood sugar before bed. It was 177 because my endo team is still not, I still am at a low insulin to carb ratio for dinner, and that's why my blood sugars are still skyrocketing. So like I said, I'm not going to manipulate them until I figure out my basal rate. So I corrected my blood sugar without having a Dexcom, and by the 2 o'clock in the morning, it was down to 100, and I woke up this morning in the mid 80s. So that tells you my basal rate overnight is pretty good, and my correction factor is perfect because I took a correction with no insulin on board for the 177, and it brought me right down to my target range of 100 when all the insulin levels were off. So at least one thing is straightened out. Now we have to straighten out the other things. So enjoy the rest of your day. I'll get back to you guys later. So I definitely cannot basal test for this time. But I think what I'm going to do is, because I'm very active between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., I'm going to drop my basal rate to 0.3 and leave it there and see if that'll work to help reduce the blood sugars I'm having in between. And I'll reevaluate it at a different time. My main focus is overnights and dinner time and breakfast, because I don't know what's really going on at those levels because the blood sugars have been the most wacky. So I'm going to try that, and we'll see how that goes. And I will update you guys when I finish my dinner test and my overnight test and breakfast test. Like I said, with basal testing, I'm active during these hours, and I'm not like being unusually active right now. And I just checked my blood sugar. I was like 65 or something like that, so I treated the low. So that indicates to me that I need less basal before the afternoon hour hits and maybe a little bit after. So what I did is I opened up a wide period from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. of a 0.3 instead of a 0.4, and hopefully that'll help. I'll reevaluate that, like I said, at a different time. I think I'm going to focus tonight on finishing my dinner test. Excuse me, finishing my dinner test and looking at the overnight basals, which are the next biggest things I need to focus on. Then I'll look at my breakfast time, and then I will look at my insulin to carb ratios again, and I should have a fairly well set profile. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. Like I said, I'm not going to try to aim for like super duper perfection, but if it's better tuned than having a straight basal, that's perfect, because our bodies do not run on just a straight basal insulin. You typically need less when you're more active, or less in the afternoon, especially for someone my age, and you need more towards evening and overnight, or you need more stable, less of the up and down for the basal insulin, if that makes sense. And then obviously I'll look at it and make sure it doesn't have double peaks or double valleys, because if that's the case, then I need to adjust it backwards or forwards so that it looks more gentle and more of a circadian rhythm for a non-diabetic's blood sugar. So it's been a long time, no update for the end of this basal testing vlog. But I did figure out my basal profile, did figure out the rest of the times that I'm going to use for now. But this video will go up on, I'm thinking, as a bonus video on Thursday. And this Sunday's video, I'm going to sit down and do the whole scientific approach behind basal testing. Now, keep in mind, the basal profile I have set up for myself is very basic and generic. The factors, the outside factors that can affect basal rates, like sickness, periods, stress, for us ladies too, periods, pregnancy, etc., etc. Any external factors, temperature, what you're doing for the day. You know, some people have different ones for work and weekends and school and not at school, or active or summer or winter or whatever. This profile I have set up is very, very basic and what my body really likes. It is a pretty basic circadian rhythm, meaning that there's smooth transitions and there's one significant peak and one significant valley. For people my age, I'm going to talk about this more on Sunday, Typically, people my age need less basal insulin in the afternoon and more in the morning to combat either the feet to floor effect, the dawn phenomenon, hormone rushes in the morning. You get the point. You need less in the afternoon when you are active, but you can't have it so low that you're going high, but you need to have it probably set a little lower than what the baseline is, only because if you're more active during a certain time, your liver isn't going to be dumping as much sugar into your bloodstream. So this is what I have set up for now. From 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., I'm at 0.4, which is where they originally started me at. They had me at a flat 0.4. Bodies do not like flat basal profiles. That, again, I will talk about on Sunday. They prefer circadian rhythm. My mother's pancreas or my father's pancreas or any non-diabetic family members of mine, their pancreas will secrete less or more insulin in between to balance out their liver. And so in order for us type 1 diabetics to do so, we need to create a basal profile. So from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., I have a 0.4. From 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., I have a 0.45. So that is my peak to combat. For me, I don't think it's so much the dawn phenomenon, although, however, the dawn phenomenon can kick in as late as 6 a.m. To 8 a.m. because I wake up at about 8 a.m. in the morning. So that might be a little bit of that, but I've noticed more when I get up in the morning. Say I woke up the other day, my blood sugar was 80. Well, it went up to 100 within pretty short period of time after skipping breakfast. So that indicates to me that is a significant rise to just increase the basal rate a little bit. So I have it running here for a little bit more time because by the time 11 a.m. rolls around, I'm getting to be more active and transitioning to my daytime activities. So then my valley from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. is 0.3 units per hour. And then I return back from 4 a.m. through midnight to 0.4. So this is what I have set up for now, and it seems to be working rather well. However, it doesn't mean that this is the final stage. This means that this is a very good baseline for me if my pump were to fail or I'm having normal, usual activity. Unusual activity like exercise, periods, stress can all be used with temporary basals, or I may find out consistently, especially on my period, that I can make a period basal profile where I may need more or less insulin during a certain time of the day. For example, I may need to run higher during my period or lower during certain times of my period than what I have created in my profile here. So I wanted to end this, didn't give exactly a chance to show everything to you, but basically if you get a rundown of my basal profile, I need less during the afternoon and more during the morning hours, especially from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. That's what I have set. Otherwise, overnight, I'm pretty stable, I'm pretty steady. I wake up with blood sugars between 80 and 110 for the most part, and time again, I have not woken up with lows. Basal testing can also be done with people on multiple daily injections. I actually never did this, but I guess I kind of did in a way because I was mainly looking at in-between meals and my fasting blood sugars to kind of determine if I needed to up or down my basal dose or my Basaglar by 1 or 2 units at 10 o'clock at night to kind of give me that pattern. Again, I will talk about this on Sunday, but I wanted to give you guys an update. So I hope you enjoyed this basal testing vlog. I hope you kind of got to see things, and again, I explained pretty well the rules of basal testing, but I will go over that in Sunday's video. I will delve into the scientific aspect of basal testing, its importance, what basal testing is, what basal testing isn't, what basal insulin is designed to do, and what basal insulin isn't designed to do. So, if you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. Feel free to hit that subscribe button down below. I post videos every single week about diabetes plus more. Stay tuned for more amazing videos coming up on basal testing and the Omnipod insulin pump. That is pretty much this week's video themes for the weekend. This is a bonus video because I have a bunch of footage on my phone and I want to get it up here before I forget. And I wanted to give you guys this information because I've been posting different things about, okay, this works, this doesn't. This is what I determined for this. So I kind of wanted to show you guys what was kind of going on. But anyways, until next time for another video, take care, God bless, be kind, spread positivity, and be thankful. Bye, everyone.